My name is Dave Gilbert, and I'm with Vince Corsaro today to talk a lot about what it is that's changed when it comes to meetings these days. And so in the last 8 weeks, we've seen an incredible shift from people needing to be there to people can't being there. And so now they're looking for alternative ways to get together to accomplish what used to be done in an in-person meeting. And so Vince and I have been collaborating about all these best practices, stuff that works when it comes to virtual space, which is otherwise known as video conferencing. So Vince, maybe we could start out today just by talking about what has changed fundamentally in the way people work and the way people communicate over the last 8 weeks.
This is like classic technology adoption in play, in that for how many years, 10, 20 years, we've had video conferencing at some level. And what we're seeing right now through some external force is adoption at a magnitude that is unusual in any technology.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is pretty well, we talk about flattening the curve with this virus. This is eliminating the curve on the technology adoption of video conferencing.
That's right. And it's really come from necessity because people still got to get together, but they've been put in their homes and they've been asked to stay in place. And so the only way to really communicate now is through audio, cell phone technology. But now we're really leaning into this visual space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're seeing a big change even in the way we're using the visual or the virtual space, and that where the rules of etiquette would have been to just have a very business-oriented persona, if you will, in the video conference. Today, the rules have really been tossed out, and that it's become more important than ever that we're people first, and that we are human, and that I can be sitting on the floor of my bedroom in a video conference because my partner is using the office right now. And it's an unprecedented leap into becoming people and recognizing that we're people first. And then we can get to the content of whatever the conversation is. So I think this is why we're seeing the explosion in happy hours and coffees. I've been doing virtual coffees for years and pitching virtual coffees for years. And people have always been, yeah, that's nice, but I'd rather go sit at a coffee shop with somebody. And it's like, that's great. Well, today you can't. So it's fascinating to me how, again, the immediate adoption of virtual happy hours just has occurred in the last 4 weeks.
Yeah, it's really funny when you think of it, because people have been kind of fighting, pushing against it. I have a group that I've met with in person every Friday morning, and you used to be part of this group, Vince. Every Friday morning for the last 32 years, we've been meeting. And so at first, when I threw this out there to those guys and said, hey, let's still stay together and make it happen. And they were pushing back saying, no, we'll get over this pretty quickly. Well, now we're on our 8th week of isolation. And so they're starting to lean into it. And today we had a really great meeting, went personal. And I don't think you can do that audio. They say that visual communication is 75% of it.
Yeah.
My communication.
And you certainly, a big complaint around video conferencing has always been around the idea of social cues and visual cues that we get from one another. And I get that. And I also think that we've let go a lot of those beliefs in the last 8 weeks, that I can pick up visual cues. I also noticed that people listen better in the virtual space, and they also speak more succinctly. They finish a sentence and put a period there.
Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Well, let's talk about how meetings are different, because, when you're in person, you can kind of control the group, lead the group. And when you're in visual space or virtual space, it changes the dynamic and discussions want to go off the rails faster. Wouldn't you agree?
No, my experience right now is that we're more focused and more on point. And maybe that will change as people become more familiar and whatnot. But right now it's like everybody's wanting to behave and get the most out of this time. But I think a fundamental change that I see is video conferences that I've been a part of for years have been primarily content focused. We're looking at somebody's PowerPoint, or we're making a presentation, we're talking about some strategy. But that didn't accommodate the idea that most of the people in that meeting were sitting in a room and had already kind of said hi to each other and asked about their sports team or checked in on how their kids were.
Yep.
So all of a sudden, we go from our video conferencing or our virtual space being primarily content oriented to today we have to also bring in the idea of context, the idea of the people and how we're working together. We need to be able to have difficult conversations in a virtual space around broken agreements, around needing to reconfirm or recommit to an agreement or a way of living or a way of working with each other. So I draw a big distinction in my work between context and content. And so video conferencing or virtual space right now has been forced to get a whole lot better on the idea of context and how we're working together, not just what we're working on. Because in live space, it's very true that when we pay attention to the context in terms of the way we're communicating and how people are working together, the content becomes a whole lot easier.
Yeah.
So we've had to bring that in to virtual space. In the past, there was some resistance there because we wanted to have the social chit chat outside. What we looked at social chit chat as the context building moment. It's not adequate. So what we're finding is even in work teams that have been together for years, people are telling me that they're learning stuff about each other that they've never known, because in virtual space, we're being more intentional about checking in as people first, about showing our environments, about becoming human before becoming leaders.
Yeah, I like what you said about it forces us to become more focused and pay attention.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the things that is actually not just changing us, but maybe changing the conversation even when we can get back together physically.
I hope so. I hope that this raises our level of awareness around context, around how we're working together, that it's not just what we're doing, but it's how we're doing it.
I think that you spend a lot of time with executives and executive teams, and you're
Right.
trying to promote this idea of meaningful conversation, not just hard business conversation.
To me, the meaningful conversation has always needed to occur.
Yeah.
My work is always around facilitating important conversations, and those might be emotional, they might be difficult, they might be challenging. We might need to challenge some long-held beliefs and whatnot. So really, this moment is about how do we build our capacity to bring those meaningful conversations into virtual space. So how do we have the conversations around agreements, around broken agreements, around long-held beliefs? Gosh, we are shattering long-held beliefs right now, primarily around virtual space, but I think it's bigger than that. I think we're shattering all kinds of long-held beliefs around the way people work together and what's important about the way we work together.
What are those that you're talking about when it comes to that?
My message here is really about the idea of people first, and that we have a longing. We are hardwired to connect as people.
Yeah.
And when we forget that, when we just become numbers, when we just become people sitting around a table, or the job title that we wear, we lose sight of our humanity, and we lose, I believe, our capacity to really get the best from each person on a team or in a group. So while many of my conversations might be around business, all of my conversations start with being people first.
One of the things that is really unique about the Zoom platform, for instance, is this idea of breakout rooms.
Right.
And you and I have done some experimenting with breakout rooms in the last week or two, and they are actually really fun. Part of it is you take a group of 20 people and you break it out into like 4 groups of 5 people. And it's more difficult to hide in a group of 5 people because you're going to be called on. You're going to have to share. You're going to have to interact with whatever that question is that's on the table. And then 5 minutes later, boom, you're all back together in the large group. So it's been a phenomenal technology.
Yeah, what's funny about it is it's what we've done in large group meetings since time began. If you have an audience of 100 people in a room and we're speaking on some topic, we will always break into small little discussion circles of huddles of 4 or 5 people. People generate their thoughts and their ideas. and then perhaps we report out to the larger group, or we just continue on with the conversation. The breakout room technology in a virtual space actually, I believe, takes that whole idea of breakouts and just puts it on steroids, because the facilitator, the moderator, the speaker, whoever's running the gig, has actually more control over what's being talked about, what's being reported out, how it's being reported out, and how we leave the group and we come back to the group. I'm finding that people are really appreciating the ability to, with technology, to immediately get in a small huddle, talk about whatever needed to be talked about there, and then immediately get back into the main room with no time lag, or waiting for one group to finish their conversation, or 14 people, they get up to go to the bathroom, or whatever. It just, that time lag just got eliminated.
So let's talk a little bit about leading discussions in virtual space. So what are some of the key practices that you would highlight, that a moderator would need to know and make sure that they're paying attention to?
Right, so what is it that a moderator, what do I want to think about when I'm thinking in virtual space versus in live space? I want to figure out, how am I giving instructions to a room, to a group? So am I using a chat board to post discussion questions? Am I using a whiteboard within the video platform? Am I using some other collaborative tool, a Google Doc or a mural or some other tool that's in a different space but still is online? So I need to figure out, how am I both posing the questions, and then how am I also going to get feedback? Big one. The second one, and this is one that many people miss and it creates a lot of chaos, is if I don't know who's next in the conversation. If I want to hear from everybody, or I want to hear from every group, I would do well to make sure I know a speaking order. So I'll sometimes, in a very low-tech way, I'll just hold up a sheet of paper and have all of our names drawn around a table, so that I know who's sitting on my left and right, so we can go around the circle. There's many different ways to do that. It's really helpful if you can know who's next speaking, so that as a moderator, I don't have to call on the next person, or you don't have to know. Again, there's also no hiding there. The third thing I think in discussions is to just like you would in a live space, I think it's important to cascade your conversations, so that we're starting with easy check-in, who am I today? What am I bringing? Where am I at? And then I move us into deeper levels where I may be going to be more challenged. I may be going to need to be a little bit more vulnerable in expressing my thought or my opinion. And then I always want to make sure that I leave the conversation with clarity on, what are our agreements from this? What are our next steps? What are we going to actually do or do differently as a result of today's conversation?
I love how you broke it down to the necessity for the moderator to know how to open the space, and then how to maximize the space, and then finally how to properly close the space.
We do this in live meetings all the time. I just think in virtual space, we're called to think of it differently. And I think for a lot of people right now, it's perhaps even taking something that they were not even totally conscious of in terms of the way they were running a meeting, and it's forcing them to be more conscious. And as a result of thinking about it more, how am I opening the space, maximizing and closing? We're doing some really good stuff, and we're doing a better job of starting a meeting and opening it and letting people show up, and underlining our guidelines or our confidentiality agreements. We're doing a better job of stating what are the outcomes of this conversation, right? So we're doing a better job of opening our meetings. I'm seeing across the board. What the video conferencing or what the virtual platforms provide us then is different ways of maximizing the space. You bring up breakout rooms, but there's also the use of chat. There's the use of online collaborative documents, being able to annotate each other's documents. I've had groups that actually will review a document in virtual space and just simply go silent, no talking, and just put all their notes inside the virtual document, so that we're actually having a conversation, but it's all being recorded inside the document.
Yeah.
The virtual space opens up lots of possibilities that we really just either didn't think of or we just didn't need in a live space.
Virtual space is superior in terms of being able to control that group and get to where you really want to go in a very focused, quick manner.
Yeah, you said earlier, and I didn't challenge you, but you said, what happens in a live space, you have all this control over the group that you don't have in a virtual space. I didn't argue with you on that, but I would say that I have more control in a virtual space because, hell, I can mute everybody.
That is so true. Yes, absolutely.
If they're not behaving, I can send them to a breakout room. I mean, I have actually more control over the group. There are some differences here around engagement, and I should have said this earlier, but the idea of how do I keep somebody engaged in a virtual space where I'm sitting here right now looking at a screen talking to you, but the birds are flying by right outside, or a truck drives by, or somebody comes to my door, or the oven needs to get checked. So there's so many more distraction possibilities while I'm sitting here. So I want to make sure that I'm building into my design and maximizing the space is to make sure that people are responding. So the breakout rooms is a great way for people to have to respond, to tangibly contribute. Typing something into a chat box is another way.
Talk about that for a second, because you often start meetings with everybody needing to put something in that chat box. What you would ask a question like, how are you feeling right now? Give me 3 words that describe how you're feeling right now.
3 words that describe how you're feeling is just a great way to help people, to let people show up, right? And let them become people, like thinking about who you are. But I use chat to post the questions that I want to be discussed in a breakout room. I'll invite people to use chat to weigh in if there's like a 1-sentence response. And sometimes I will frame a question so that it can lend itself to a 1-sentence response that everybody can put in chat, and then we can see them. I like the chat function to just keep us engaged. It's not dissimilar to using the whiteboard or using, the shared screen functionality. As I said earlier, my preference is to use a dual screen when possible so that I can continue seeing people that are in the conversation. For instance, right now I'm on a pad looking at you, but I can also turn to my desktop and be in a collaborative document at the same time.
Yeah.
So that I can stay engaged with all of the people in the room, but I can also be engaged in a collaborative workspace, online workspace.
Well, earlier you talked about using the video platform for almost recreational kind of things, virtual happy hours.
Sure.
Virtual coffee breaks. And you've done a lot of this lately. And so maybe we could throw out there a few of the ideas that people can use and not go stir crazy because they can't actually go and give anybody a hug and a handshake.
Right. I started doing virtual coffees probably 15 years ago. And it was when I knew that I had friends in other parts of the world and I wanted to stay connected. So my thought was, well, if I was in the same town as them, I would probably be meeting at a coffee shop right now. We'd be sitting outside and we'd be spending 45 minutes or whatever, drinking a cup of coffee and just chatting, right? Yeah. So I've been doing virtual coffees for a long time. And I'm lucky to have a worldwide circle of friends and associates and colleagues and clients and people that I know. And so virtual coffees have been standard operating procedure in my life for a long time. Now the virtual happy hour, I just did my first one of those actually this Christmas during the last holiday season, well before this lockdown occurred. And it was with a group that I meet with virtually regularly, but in our typical meetings, it's very structured and very, formal. We have a formal agenda. So we just got together for 90 minutes and all poured a glass of something to drink. And we just sat around as if we were in a bar. Yeah. So I laugh a bit when I see everybody now doing virtual happy hours, thinking it's the newest thing since sliced bread. And in some ways it is new, but it just shows how important just those informal human connections really are.
Yeah.
Even with people that we work with, even with, you're hearing stories right now of virtual happy hours between families and parents and their kids getting together who live all over the world or all over the country. I think it's a wonderful thing, the way we're learning to socialize in virtual space. And I do hope that that will continue when we're able to mix it up and have live meetings, but also we can still get together in a very social and fun way virtually.
Well, there's probably another book in this that we could be keeping track of all the different interesting, innovative ways that this technology is being used.
You know, the book's being written right now by everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Like if you do a search engine on virtual happy hours right now, you become inundated with ideas of games and collaborative recreational things. I mean, the whole explosion of people singing together online. I was with a group a week ago where we actually did some dramatic skits in virtual space, and we could all play our characters, and it just didn't matter that we weren't in the same space.
Our kids are growing up with this now. I have a 9-year-old grandchild and a 5-year-old grandchild. Both of them have stopped going to school as of 3 or 4 weeks ago. And they're coming over and meeting their teachers through virtual space. They got their iPads out and they're learning to read. You know, the 5-year-old, the 4th grader is doing real work in real time with a real teacher, all virtually. It's very interesting. And just think about how comfortable they're going to be with this technology as she and he grow up.
Yeah. And frankly, they've been comfortable with this. I mean, grandkids and grandchildren have been meeting on FaceTime for, 5, 6, 10 years.
Yeah.
So this is not, again, it's not new. It's just the amazing rate of adoption that has occurred in the last 8 weeks.
Yes.
It went from a few to everyone.
Yeah, we have this joke going on about Lucy. When she was 18 months old, she bought her first app because she was playing on her mom's phone and had this balloon go by, and she popped the balloon, and that's how they bought the app.
Right.
She was a wizard at swiping right from the time that she was just getting out of diapers, so I mean, it's just amazing.
I think a good question that you asked earlier was, why are some meetings chaotic? Like, what is it that we talk a lot about things that we want to make sure we do, but what are the things that we want to make sure we don't do? So a couple of thoughts come to mind on what is it that what are the rules or what are the boundaries now? I think we need to be really careful about recording anything right now. If I want people to be open and to share anything about their own lives, to share anything that might be any vulnerable at all, then we really need to have a ground rule of no recordings and no screenshots.
Yeah.
That we need to think about confidentiality in virtual space. I think too, my background here isn't anything exciting or interesting, but there's just some really simple guideposts here around no backlighting, no background noise, because even if I'm on mute in those moments that I do want to speak, if I'm in a noisy space, it doesn't work.
Right.
No driving, no walking, no working on a exercise machine while I'm in a virtual meeting. So I want to think about what are the things that create distraction and what are the things that create engagement. So I want to eliminate the distractions and maximize engagement. Another thing that I think creates chaos in a meeting is when someone can't allow silence. So sometimes we just need to stop and take a breath and recollect ourselves and think about what we're going to do next. What I've noticed is some folks need to keep going, and then they end up chasing rabbit trails or getting off topic or going places that we really didn't need to go. And I just invite people to give themselves permission to stop, take a breath, think about what needs to happen next, slow things down. When things get emotional, slow it down.
Vince, thank you for taking some time out of your day to just talk about virtual space. You are definitely a seasoned veteran in this whole thing and have a lot to teach others. So thanks for sharing your wisdom. Thanks for being available. And we'll get together again down the road as we continue to learn more day by day in this virtual space.